If New York Giants defensive coordinator Shane Bowen wants to really improve the team's run defense this season, he needs to stop doing this one thing. I'll tell you what on today's Locked On Giants podcast, starting right now.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traynor, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And we thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you are making us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well, and hope you have had a great Labor Day weekend. Today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On NFL to get $20 off your first purchase. All right, Giant fans, on today's Locked On Giants podcast, we're here, week one of the regular NFL season. Giants get back to work on Monday, but as they get into their prep, what we're going to start off with is how can the Giants improve the run defense? Now, I was doing some research over the weekend. I came across a trend that the Giants have done, at least last year, that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm going to tell you what that trend is. I'm going to give you some numbers, some historical numbers as well, and kind of just throw this idea out there as a way that the Giants can definitely improve the run defense. All right. And then in segment two, we're going to take a look at Jalin Hyatt. Can the Giants salvage him? I'm going to tell you why I think they can salvage him. And it has nothing to do with any personal feelings or anything like that. It has to do with what they have asked Jalin Hyatt to do in this offense. And then finally, speaking of the offense, in segment three, we're going to take a look at one thing that really needs to change on the Giants offense. Again, it's a trend that I came across when I was doing some research over the weekend. So I'm going to share all that with you on today's show. Again, welcome on into everybody. All right. Now, let's start off with the Giants run defense. I don't have to tell you guys and gals that the Giants run defense has been a problem. Now, most people will point to the personnel. They will say, okay, look, there's Dexter Lawrence, who, was very good against the run, probably the best that the Giants have. And then who else do they have? Well, last year they had Raheem Nunez-Roches, who really, wasn't as good against the run as maybe you would have liked to have seen him be. Raheem Nunez-Roches, unfortunately, a lot of times handled by solo blocking or on the ground, and that was a problem as well. So the Giants, of course, added a bunch of guys for the run defense. Roy Robertson-Harris, they drafted Darius Alexander, who's still a little bit raw and has a lot of promise. But there was one trait or one characteristic or one trend, if you want to call it that Shane Bowen used a lot of last year that I don't think makes a whole lot of sense. And what that was, according to Pro Football Focus, the Giants played Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns, their outside linebackers. They played them all too often at a three-point stance against the run. All right. Now, I have some numbers for you. So in 2024, according to Pro Football Focus, Burns played 37.5% of his snaps against the run in a three-point stance. Thibodeau, 59.8% of his snaps were in a three-point stance against the run. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, Burns and Thibodeau are quick off the snap. When they have to be down in a three-point stance, there's that slight delay now of getting out of that stance and getting into a position to help clean up the stuff coming at them on the edges. So really not the best use of their talent to have them in a three-point stance. Now, I went back, again, using Pro Football Focus, and I looked at what the history is for Burns in a three-point stance and Thibodeau in a three-point stance. Burns' last year in Carolina, he was in a 3-point stance against a run 4% of the time. All right. In 2020, where he had a career high 64.1% of the snaps, his run defense snaps in a 3-point stance, he logged his fewest stops. All right. So having Burns in a 3-point stance, not really the best use of his talents. All right. He posted his best run defense grade, according to Pro Football Focus, in the final year of with Carolina. Again, when he was only in a 3-point stance 4% of the time against the run. So again, what you're doing by asking him to be in a 3-point stance is you're neutralizing his quickness off the snap. And this is just something that if you go back and you look at some of the tape, and I didn't go through all the plays, but some of the bigger runs that the Giants gave up, that was part of the problem. Now, there were other elements that were a factor in the run defense being so bad. Like I said, Raheem Nunez-Roches not getting off of blocks or not tying up double blockers, missed tackles were a problem. But basically, when you have the linebackers, the outside linebackers, and they can't funnel guys inside, and running backs burst through the, to the second level and they get to the outside or whatever, and now the inside linebackers have to chase after them, that's a problem. And that was something that showed up quite a bit on tape for the Giants last year. Now, let me just give you Thibodeau's numbers, all right? Thibodeau in 2022 and 2023, when Wink Martindale was here, Thibodeau played in a 3-point stance against the run 19.9% of his snaps, okay? In 2023, again, with Wink Martindale as the defensive coordinator, the Giants had Thibodeau play in a 3-point stance 14.4% of the time. Now, remember, last year, that number shot up to 59.8%. That's a big, big jump. Now, Thibodeau, for what it's worth, still was pretty good against the run. But just overall, it takes more than one guy to stop the run. And if you're not deploying your personnel to their strengths, and this is one of the big question marks I have about Shane Bowen as a defensive coordinator, why I think he is on a hot seat, is, if you're not using your guys to the best of your ability, then what are we doing here? Now, is it because Bowen felt that he didn't have the guys that he needed and he felt, okay, let me just try this and see if it works? Could be. But wouldn't a good coach really figure out, okay, you know what? Let me see if I can get the best out of these guys, to playing them to their strengths and just, adjusting my scheme accordingly. So I just found that very, very revealing. And I'm curious to see what the Giants do moving forward for this year. That was just, something that just stood out like a sore thumb to me when I was doing the research over the weekend on, just getting ready for week 1 and the upcoming rushing teams that the Giants are going to face, like the Eagles and whatnot. So that jumped out at me and I wanted to share that. Now, for what it's worth, again, the fact that these guys had 3 points, were in a 3-point stance, Dexter usually gets doubled. Like I said, Nacho, Raheem Nunez-Roches neutralize. Nacho was involved in 302 run defensive snaps last year. He had 17 stops and only 1 tackle for loss or no gain, according to Pro Football Focus. You think that's good production, folks? I don't. All right. He was also involved in 133 key running plays and gave up an average depth of tackle, 3.13 yards. So, you want those guys up front to limit the yardage gain. You want to stop them, the opposing runner at the line of scrimmage if you can. Giants just did not do a good job of that. And how many runs? I mean, you guys probably all saw the games. How many times did we see an opposing running back get to the second level or beyond? A lot. And this is just one way that I think Shane Bowen can improve the run defense. And that is, don't have the outside linebackers with their hand in the dirt so much. Once in a while, okay. But as much as they played last year, not a good use of their talent. So let's see if Shane Bowen adjusts. And, just one last thing I'll leave you with, because I know some of you are probably wondering the missed tackles by the linebackers. Now, because the defensive ends weren't necessarily able to funnel guys, running backs, I should say, inside for the inside linebackers to clean it up, you probably saw a few more missed tackles. And the biggest example of that, Bobby Okereke. In 13 games played, Bobby Okereke had 11 missed tackles. All right. One less, by the way, than in 17 games played in 2023 when he had that great year. Micah McFadden was a little bit better in the missed tackle department. He had 16 missed tackles, which was actually down from the 25 he logged in 2023. But still, you want to give your linebackers a little bit more help in order to, push guys inside and give them less ground that they have to cover to stop these guys. And the Giants just did not do a good job of that last year. So that has to change. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, we're going to talk about Jalin Hyatt, some interesting numbers, some stats on how they have deployed him, and maybe how they can use him a little bit differently in order to get the most out of him. Hey, Giant fans, NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and price jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why you need to check out Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included so that the price you see is the price you will pay. See where your seats are, and the closer it gets to showtime, you stand to save even more. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Hey, Giant fans, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I absolutely love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. So if you think the Giants, who are currently an underdog in their week 1 game against the Washington Commanders, can beat the spread, jump right in and start playing today. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, Giant fans, we have an important request for you before we get to segment 2. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started, and everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we got a lot to cover today. Obviously, the Giants, week 1, they start to get ready for the Washington Commanders, and one of the position groups that is probably still a little bit of a question mark, at least as far as I'm concerned, is the receiver depth. Now, the Giants should be set with Malik Neighbors and Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson. And hopefully, by the way, Malik Neighbors is going to be healthy and be able to play after missing however many weeks he did at the end there of summer. But the one guy who, interestingly, not only is still on the team, but the Giants, for whatever reason, whether it's because they haven't found anybody or maybe they think they can get the most out of him, Jalin Hyatt, their 3rd-round draft pick, who they traded up for in 2023 to get. Now, over the weekend, I did some research on how the Giants have deployed Jalin Hyatt, and there were some interesting revelations. So I'm going to share that with you. All right. So let me first give you the numbers for Jalin Hyatt. In his career, he has caught 34 of 67 passes, 530 yards, 42 catchable balls, and he has faced press coverage on 249 of his snaps. That all per Pro Football Focus, by the way. He's been involved in 47 key plays, which were either graded, positively or negatively by Pro Football Focus. And Jalin Hyatt has had 14 first downs, 5 drops. He has caught 8 of 17 contested catch balls, has 62 yards after the catch, and has caught 81% of his catchable targets with 11 explosive plays of 15 or more yards. All right, so it sounds like there's a little bit of a mix, right? But let's take a closer look at his past targets or his routes that he's run. So according to Pro Football Focus, the most frequent routes that Jalin Hyatt has been asked to run, a go route, 36.4% of the time, and a hitch, 19.7% of the time. All right, now I'm going to break this down for you in terms of his production on those 2 routes. On go routes, Jalin Hyatt has caught 5 passes for 156 yards, 10 yards after the catch. He caught 62.5% catchable targets, had 1 drop, a 34.3 average depth of target. All right. He was also on the receiving end of 2 interceptions and was involved in 5 big plays. Now, with these go routes, the biggest problem with Jalin Hyatt has been tracking the ball. Right? He, for whatever reason, has either misjudged it or just hasn't gotten into a position to adjust his route to track the ball. And it is hope now that with a better quarterback throwing him the ball, that maybe some of these balls that were a little off target that he would have had to adjust to, maybe some of these balls will be catchable by Jalin Hyatt. But see, here's the one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and that is the use of the hitch route. Now, the hitch route falls into that comeback route area, okay? So in other words, the receiver runs a pattern, stops, and then comes back for the ball. So let me give you the numbers there. So Jalin Hyatt on hitch routes, he caught 10 out of 13 passes for 57 yards, a 76.9% catch rate, 2 yards after the catch, 0 drops, 0 interceptions on balls targeted when he ran a hitch, 0 big plays, a 7.5 yards average depth of targeting. Now, here's the problem now with Jalin Hyatt running comeback routes. I don't necessarily think those are the best routes for him. All right. His average separation in 2024, 2.1 yards. In 2023, it was 2.5 yards. So if you have this guy who's a speedster, why are you having him run so many comeback routes? Now, the purpose of the comeback route, I get it. You want to, when you're going up against zone coverage, a good receiver will find the soft spot in the zone, settle in, catch the ball, and hopefully get away with more yards after the catch. So that's the purpose of them. But if it's not a fit for what the receiver is doing, shouldn't you maybe look at adjusting what you ask him to do? Now, I have the rest of Jalin Hyatt's route tree, again, per Pro Football Focus. Just real quick, he's run posts on 12.1% of his targets, corner routes 1.5, out routes 6.1, in routes 3%, comebacks 0, slant 10.6, crossing 10.6, and it looks like he's had 0 in the flat. So again, this all boils down to what they're asking him to do. And this was the problem, or one of the problems, when Jalin Hyatt came out of Tennessee. And that is his route running. He wasn't a receiver who had maybe had a lot of experience running the entire route tree. That problem has followed him to the NFL. So if you're the Giants and you're trying to build up confidence in this young receiver, doesn't it make sense to give him routes that he has done well with? Now, like I said before, maybe Russell Wilson, who is a lot more accurate, at least based on his statistical history, maybe he gets more out of Jalin Hyatt this year. I don't know. The other question is how many reps and how many targets is Jalin Hyatt actually going to get, given that you have Neighbors and you have Slayton and you have Robinson and then Theo Johnson at tight end. That's 4 guys in front of him. So at best, Jalin Hyatt is maybe 5th on the option tree, if you will. So, Jalin Hyatt, I don't think they're ready to give up on him. And as I've said before, because he's a draft pick that they traded up to get, that he's only been in the league for 2 years, they want to see if they can maybe get him over the hump. if maybe the third year is the charm for him. Do I think it will work out? I root for the kid. He's a good kid, as I've said many times before on this show. But I also think that in terms of the routes, while that is part of the problem, the other part remains the lack of physicality that he shows, despite the fact that he bulked up, this past off season, and an ability to track the ball. And it is hoped, again, that because of Russell Wilson continues to be as accurate with the ball and, giving the receivers less work to have to do down the field, whether it's Hyatt or any of the receivers, that maybe that will result in better production for Jalin Hyatt. So that's something I want to see. And remember, Russell Wilson and Jalin Hyatt, they did a lot of work in the offseason. Russell Wilson believes in Jalin Hyatt, and sometimes that's all you need if you're a young receiver who has struggled. You need a guy who is going to believe in you and say, hey, I'm going to get you the ball. And if you drop the ball, oh, don't worry about it. Forget about it. Let's move on to the next play. I think in that regard, plus, like I said, the accuracy, Russell Wilson could be really good for Jalin Hyatt. So we'll see if that's how it plays out. But I think that's something that the Giants maybe might look to change when it comes to Jalin Hyatt. Just get him more comfortable in some of the routes he's good at before you start asking him to do some of these other routes where maybe he's had some struggles. Okay, coming up next, Giant fans, speaking of the offense, there is a glaring stat that I came across that I would like to see change. I'm going to tell you what that stat is right after this. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is here, and that means fantasy football season is also here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. And if you haven't joined a league yet, now's the time, and it's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. Yahoo Fantasy is loaded with fun ways to compete and brand new features that make the game even better. Want more ways to play? Try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until one team is left standing. Want to play instantly with friends? Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Get your crew together and go head to head in a private league. Don't have a crew? Hey, no problem. Join a public league, the easiest way to play. So don't wait. Start your league right now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Again, that's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Hey, Giant fans, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings you your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Monarch makes it simple to review finances with my partner. We can both see budgets, goals, and spending activity in one place. And if it does that for me, it'll do it for you. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with our promo code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we are officially in week 1 of the NFL season. The Giants and the Washington Commanders play on Sunday, Giants at Washington. So, of course, coming up later this week, we will have the return of Crossover Thursday. David Harrison of Locked On Commanders and myself, we will break down for you the key storylines. We'll do statistic predictions, all the good stuff that we usually do here on Crossover Thursday. So that is definitely coming up. And then also coming up on Thursday is the all-new New York Giants Squad Show. This twice weekly live stream will cover the hottest topics as discussed by an expert panel that includes yours truly, former New York Giants cornerback Mark Collins, Locked On's very own Brandon Olson, who's also with New York Giants on SI, and host Jay Berman. The New York Giants squad show is set to debut this Thursday, so stay tuned to Locked On Giants for more information, and we hope to see you on the squad show. All right, let's get into this last segment. This last segment is a stat that, as I was researching the Giants offense and trends this weekend, I came across this particular stat that actually I had been curious about. And that is, how many times did the Giants quarterbacks throw beyond the sticks? Now, there were so many times in my recollection where I would sit there and I would say, why aren't the Giants running their receivers to the sticks? Why are they running them 1 yard short? What's the thinking behind that? Well, you can sit here and you can say, well, it was because of the coverage. You could say it was because of the design of the play. Folks, that's a stat that needs to change. And I'm going to give you some numbers, again, courtesy of Pro Football Focus. All right, so the Giants in 2024, Daniel Jones, who took the bulk of the snaps at quarterback, was 15th amongst a sample size of 34 quarterbacks with at least 300 dropbacks who threw above the sticks or beyond the sticks, all right? So that was a 52.7% time that he was throwing beyond the sticks. Russell Wilson with the Pittsburgh Steelers last year threw beyond the sticks 52.3% of the time, which was 17th amongst the 34 qualifying quarterbacks with 300 dropbacks. So Russell Wilson, a smidge less than what Daniel Jones did. So that got me thinking again, why not throw beyond the sticks? Is it pass protection? Is it the fact that the quarterbacks were holding the ball too long? Is it the routes being called for? You know, who can forget, a few years ago, Jason Garrett, when he was the offensive coordinator, all the stick routes he had the Giants run. Okay. It could be any number of those circumstances. But what I would like to see, again, is fewer of those comeback routes, right? There's no reason, when you have a receiver coming back for the ball, and again, it's useful in zone coverage in certain situations, but think about this. The receiver stops, comes back, and now a defender has an opportunity to catch up and stop him and limit yards after the catch, right? And that's what we saw a lot with the Giants. So let me give you some stats here, all right? Last year, the Giants had 219 hitch routes, the 8th most in the NFL, all right? They ran 10 comeback routes, according to Pro Football Focus, which was tied for 11th with the Titans, right? Again, if you want to be a vertical offense, you got to run forward, not backwards. And the Giants just seem to run backwards too many times. And remember, when the receiver is catching the ball, it's where he goes down, not where he ran to and then came back. So if the guy runs to, if he runs 12 yards and then he comes back 2 yards to catch the ball and gets tackled, that's where the ball's going to get placed. So I would like to think moving forward, we'll see less of those hitch routes because remember, the Giants, I think part of their initial strategy was let's get speedsters in here, guys who can pick up the yards after the catch. Well, they haven't had a whole lot of luck with that. So wouldn't it make more sense to at least get to the first down marker, catch the ball, and then see what you pick up and not have to worry about, now all of a sudden you've got 3rd and short or 4th and short, all right? And then, by the way, now you have a penalty or a sack or something else goes wrong, and now 3rd and short becomes 3rd and long. Why take that chance? So that's something I would definitely like to see the Giants maybe look to do differently this year. And, it's interesting. A lot of you have asked me, well, how will the offense be different with Mike Kafka calling it? Because it does look like Mike Kafka is going to call it, even though Brian Dable hasn't made that official. I think it's pretty much official based on the fact that Dable didn't do it all summer long and all spring long. The answer to the question about how the Giants offense might look different with Kafka, we might see some more deep plays, but for the most part, the basic offense is Dable's offense, right? It's his system that he ran in Buffalo and every place else he's really been. So that's something I want to track this year, how much different it is in terms of what routes they run, the percentage of routes, the percentage of targets, what they're asking the receivers to do. An important thing, obviously, is going to be time to throw. Sometimes Russell Wilson has been known to hold the ball a little bit longer for whatever the reason. Is that because the receivers are just not getting into the routes quickly enough, or is there another factor? There's just so many different variables, but I do expect the Giants offense to be a little bit more explosive this year. I think we will see an uptick in, the deeper routes, the posts, the go routes, all that stuff. Because look, if you want to have chunk plays, you got to go forward. You can't be coming back and then, trying to evade a defender who is basically closing in on you because you now have stopped for a split second or two, and you've given that defender an opportunity to come up and make a play on you. So that's something I want to see. Hopefully the Giants more explosive. Look, the Giants offense looked pretty darn good in the preseason, but we know the preseason is just that. It doesn't count. Teams are not playing their starters. They're not game planning. So, that's just raw football, just playing like you were playing on the streets, when you were kids, just tossing the ball around and seeing who could best who. So I want to see if the Giants make these tweaks. And if so, what kind of results do they have with them? All right, Giant fans, I want to thank you for making Locked On Giants part of your day today. Or if you made us your first listen of the day, again, thank you so much for that. NFL fantasy draft season is here. So for your next listen, please go and find the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Madjuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so that you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, I'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode of Locked On Giants. Until then, have a great, great night.